And I will advise.
This meeting is being recorded.
I will advise as well during the presentation, for the sake of those people who have less bandwidth, internet bandwidth, that if we all, until we get to a Q&A time, all turn our cameras off. That will save the bandwidth from those who don't have the bonus of more bandwidth than they need. I think that would be a good help as well. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Doug, who will introduce our featured speaker. Doug, the microphone's yours.
Good evening, Harry. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Adrian, Victor Echo 7, November Zulu. I met Adrian over a year ago on Echolink. Since then, he has introduced me to the Canada Hub and helped me set up my AllStar node. Adrian was first licensed in 1982 at the age of 15. He started with CW and he still loves it. So we'll have to arrange a QSO sometime, Adrian. 20 meters is nice between BC and Ontario right now. He's active on all bands from 1.8 megahertz to 1.2 gigahertz, CW, sideband, AM, FM, and the JT modes. His entire station is remotely controllable except for the amplifier. For digital, he uses WSJTX and TeamViewer. For all of other modes, he uses ICOM's RSBA1 or Win4 ICOM software. Adrian runs 3 repeaters from his QTH on 220, 440, and 1.2 gigahertz for the North Fraser Amateur Radio Club, whose mandate is to activate the lesser used bands and modes including P25, NXDN, DMR, D-Star, and narrowband FM. They put the first 900 megahertz repeaters on the air in BC, and the first NXDN repeater. Each repeater is on AllStar, connected to the BC Hub or the Canada Hub. He also operates IRLP node 1070, which is permanently connected to the Canada Hub's IRLP reflector 9029. In May 2020, Adrian was part of the team that launched the Canada Hub, AllStar nodes 71300 and 71301, IRL reflector 9029, Echolink, Victor Echo 7, November Zulu Lima, to provide Canadian hams and visitors from around the world a place to connect and have QSOs. It's steadily growing in popularity, and anyone is welcome to drop by and say hello. Adrian believes that repeaters are there to be used, connect, so put out a call sign and say hello to a fellow ham radio operator. He encourages all hams to consider joining the weekly Trans-Canada Net on the Hub every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please join me in welcoming Adrian, VE7NZ, to the Kitchener-Waterloo Amateur Radio Club.
Thank you. Wow, what a, I gather you got a lot of that off of the QRZ page. So very interesting. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And we'll do the usual, let's make sure that's working question. Let's see here. Hit the right button here. Okay, you should see a nice full screen of the start page. Correct?
Looks good, thanks.
Okay, good. Let me get my little laser pointer out here so I can point at things as well. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate this. Glad to be here. Always happy to talk to fellow hams, especially Canadian hams, and talk about this project. I'm going to cover some things today that are going to be maybe for some of you a bit introductory, for others maybe a little bit more complex. I'll try to strike the right balance. The presentation lasted about 35 minutes. Check the time check there. Yeah, okay. And then there's plenty of time for Q&A after that. So we're going to cover what AllStar is. We'll talk about how to use it as a networking tool, if you will, both from a kind of a repeater management perspective as well as for you as an individual. We'll talk about how you can use AllStar as a repeater controller as well. I'm going to talk then about the Canada Hub project, which is a result of what I've done with AllStar. Of course, everybody wants to know how much does this cost, and I'll talk about what equipment you need and costs, and answer your questions after that. I'll do some FAQs because I typically get certain questions quite regularly, so I'll just whip through those to see if that covers a lot of them. Okay, so what is AllStar and how does it work? AllStar was actually started as an adaptation of voice over IP phone software, PBX software called Asterisk, and that was actually written in 1999. In the AllStar code, you'll see lots of things about extensions and calls and trunking and all these things. It's because it all comes from the telephone nomenclature. Basically, any point in the AllStar network, which is typically a repeater, but it can also be a private connection, is considered a node. And nodes can be connected to the internet. And there's over 6,000 of them right now. So I've given some examples here. You know, it's a repeater on 2 meters, 440 and 220, all connecting to each other. And then any of those can connect to any of these 6,000 nodes worldwide. Fantastic. Now, it could also be used as an inexpensive and very flexible repeater control. And I'll show you what I did with my 220 repeater to do that. And a lot of people don't know this about AllStar. They just think of it as a networking tool, but it's actually a fully baked repeater controller and a very powerful one too. It has great voice quality. It provides full mesh networking, which I'll explain in an upcoming slide. And it can be managed remotely. So that's great for a lot of repeater sites if you want to make changes without going on site. You can make connections to other nodes via DTMF over the air, something we're all familiar with, but also via a secure control panel from a web browser. I'll give some illustrations of that. You can also access nodes securely over the internet using your phone, a laptop, or other devices, Hamshack hotline, for example, and things like that. And we'll talk about that and why that's good or bad. Welcome comments on that. Okay, so what equipment do you need? The ever popular Raspberry Pi is really the main computer. It's a single board computer that most people are familiar with, and very powerful for its size. You can connect that Raspberry Pi to a radio interface that would then connect to the various lines on your repeater if you want to connect your repeater to AllStar, and I'll show those connections shortly. There's also the ability to plug in little simplex radios, as shown in the bottom right. And those are typically half-watt radios that you can use as a simplex node, something called a micro node, and it's just great for home use. There's a UHF one shown here on the right, so it just plugs into 2 of those USB ports. You can then configure it through menus and maybe set it up on 446 dot something, and now you've got a great little node around your QTH. Okay, there's also a concept of what's called a hub node. And a hub node is really no different to a regular node, other than it's not connected to any radios. It's designed to just route traffic and connect nodes together so that people can have a group conversation or a conference or that sort of thing. And again, in the phone world, you could think of that as a conference call. Same idea as RLP, what they call reflectors, and what Echolink calls conference servers. So on the right here, I'm showing the Canada Hub, which is a hub. And there's a repeater in Ontario, BC, and PEI all connecting into it. They can all hear each other. But with the hub, you can also do, well, with any node, you can connect into Echolink. But typically, hubs like the Canada Hub provide connections to the other networks. So we've got as Doug said at the beginning, a connection into an RLP reflector, 9029, and can also be reached via my call sign on Echolink. So a hub is, again, it's just think of it as a router that's bringing all the connections together. You can connect to that hub and talk to whoever else is connected to it. Some people also connected digital modes. I haven't done that on the Canada Hub, but there are networks like Freestar in the UK that have done that. So what are some of the popular hubs? The East Coast Reflector is one. It's based out of the New York area, but covers much of the US and parts of the world. Freestar out of the UK is another great one, and of course the Canada Hub. Okay, let's talk about some examples. I'm going to start right with the basics. Let's say we've got a repeater on 2 meters. Let's say your club has a few repeaters, as you do. Doug sent me the list earlier. So you've got VE3 AAA here on 2 meters, and it wants to connect to VE3 BBB on 440. Now, when we used to do this back in the 80s, 90s, even a little more recent than that, typically you had to co-locate your club's repeaters at the repeater site in a rack and try to get them all play nicely together and hardwire them all together with a controller or set up an RF link between them, say on another band. Well, the good news is you don't need to do that with AllStar. Your repeaters could be, as long as they're both on the internet, as long as they're, that's all, it doesn't matter where they are, as long as they're both on the internet, they can connect. But you remember I showed that Sherry node, I called it. Sherry is the manufacturer, is the brand. There's a number of them, but that micro node that you could run half-watt radio out of your place. So VA3XX here has one of those, and he's able to connect into the VE3 AAA machine, and now he's on this network. If he keys up, or if he's listening, it doesn't matter whether somebody's on the 440 machine or the 2-meter machine, he's now part of the network. Now, another fellow here, VE3YYY, is in Hawaii. He's on his iPhone. Didn't want to bring a radio on the plane or whatever, but could pull out the iPhone and use a client on that, and now it connects into the network. I mentioned full mesh. What that means is you could connect any of these repeaters in any order you want. Once they're connected, they are one giant cloud of connectivity. Somebody on the 2-meter machine will be heard on the 220 and the 440 and vice versa. If we've got VA3XX here, again, he's on simplex, he's connected to the AAA machine. He'll be heard on any of those machines. He keys up, he's going to be heard on all 3. And the Hawaii fellow, he's decided for whatever reason to connect into the 220 repeater today, but it really doesn't matter where he connects in. He can connect to VA3XX, he can connect to AAA or BBB here, any of those, and he would have the same, he would be part of the same network. So that's what full mesh means. And full mesh also, well, there's another characteristic, and I think I described this a little bit more later, but just so I don't miss it. If you look here, VE3, the 220 machine, it's actually got 3 connections coming into it. And that's one of the wonderful things with AllStar is it doesn't matter. There's really no enforced limit on the number of connections. It's really, processing power and bandwidth, and really you can handle hundreds. So what that means is that if the club sets up in this scenario with these 3 repeaters, anybody can still call into that network or out from that network and make connections. It's not blocked. If you'd set those connections up using RLP, for example, once a connection is established, that repeater is considered engaged and is not available for another connection. But with AllStar, you can still come in as an additional connection. So you go from this, where you have a simple little club network, and you start getting it growing and growing. So on the right here, I've got the network we were just looking at, and AAA has decided to connect into the Canada hub. The Canada hub is connected to the Manitoba hub, which has a bunch of repeaters, and the BC hub, which has a bunch of repeaters, including the ones that Scott and I have set up out here on the left, and also some international visitors coming in from quite often the UK or the US. And it doesn't matter again, wherever anybody speaks. If VA3XX here wants to key up his radio on UHF and say, put his call sign out, see who's out there, every one of these nodes is going to light up and be heard. Now, does that mean it's going to create chaos? No, absolutely not. It's extremely well managed. I'll get into that a bit more and talk a little bit more about the level of activity. So I mentioned one of the ways you can connect is using DTMF. Typically, it's a star, you key up with your radio on your local repeater, dial *3, and then the node you want to connect to. So if you dial *3, 517-300, you connect to the Canada hub. When you're done, you dial *10. Now, those are the default codes. If you have some of, I know you guys don't have any of the troubles they maybe have in Toronto, I'm sure, but if you have troubles like they have had in Toronto at times on some of their machines, you can change those codes and customize them if you need to. We haven't had any problems, luckily. The other way you can connect is there's a web page that you can set up for your club members. Can be secured with a username and password, and you can set different levels of access control as to what each level of user can do, different privileges. Now, what you're seeing here looks a little overwhelming because this is the admin level. So I'm able to go in here and do all these things that I don't even know what half of them do. I don't need to do most of this, but if I needed to, I could. But you could set it up much more simply for a regular user where it's just got the connect and disconnect buttons and things like that. What you're seeing here, and I'll show a better example shortly, but what you're seeing here is I'm controlling my 220 repeater by selecting it here in the drop down. I'm saying I want to connect it to 517-300. I click the connect button there. and we're connected. And then when I look down here later on, I'll see where those connections are and how long they've been connected and all those kinds of things. The dashboard is also interesting. You can get a lot of stats, see if your system's overheating, especially if you've got a remote location. And we have one site in an attic of a workshop out in Abbotsford, or Aldergrove, which is last summer we were getting up to 47 degrees Celsius, and we had to shut it down because the thing was just cooking. There was no way to keep it cool enough. But it's good to have all those stats. Okay, how is this different from IRLP or Echolink? And I am a longtime user of both of these. I have a fondness for IRLP because a friend of mine, Dave Cameron, invented it. And I was one of the very first, he lives not far from me here in Vancouver, and it was one of the very first IRLP nodes. So I have a lot of people get into, oh, this mode's better than this mode and all those kinds of debates. I don't think that way. But it is interesting to understand technically how they differentiate. So they're all great and they're all popular. IRLP is primarily used, as I said, Echolink, as I mentioned earlier, is point-to-point. Unless you connect to a reflector, it's once you're connected, and people basically get a busy tone if they try to connect to you after that. With AllStar, you're always open, so you'll never miss a call, and it's got huge capacity. The voice quality is excellent as well. Echolink recently did an update, and their voice quality is also quite good now, but I've always been amazed by the voice quality in AllStar. On Echolink, though, it's interesting. The software out of the box actually supports Echolink, and it's very easy to set up. So if you have an Echolink username and password, you simply enter those two things into the configuration file and do the same port forwarding that you do in Echolink normally. And now your node can also be reached via Echolink, and you can call out to other Echolink nodes. So it's kind of nice. It's built right in. Okay, as a repeater controller, what can it do? This repeater here is my 220 repeater that I've had since the 80s. And about 3 years ago, I decided this controller here, which is the size of a small shoebox, was getting a bit noisy. The pots were always needing cleaning. It was always drifting. The squelch was drifting, things like this. And just the way that old equipment does. Nothing terrible, but I thought, well, I'd really like to add subaudible tone control and I'd change the courtesy beep and a few other things. And why don't I disconnect the power to that board here and replace it with a Raspberry Pi and a radio interface, like I showed you in an earlier slide. That's just sitting in a 3D printed case. With this, I'm now able to adjust audio levels, compression, set timers for whatever timers you want, hang timers, timeout timers, the time between the courtesy tones, how the tones sound, IDs, announcements. You can set up multiple subaudible tones, and based on those tones, enable different behaviors. And of course, you've got serial ports here, GPIO ports on the Pi, and USB ports that you can connect things to. And so if you've got devices at your site, like let's say it's solar powered, you want to know what the battery level is, or you want to know how much sunlight you're getting, or information from a weather station to see if it's okay to go for a site visit. All that stuff can be brought back through the Raspberry Pi as well, which is fantastic. And mine's in my basement, so I don't have to do that. But for a lot of people, it's a thing, especially if you've got a repeater sitting at the top of a mountaintop. And in this example, and this is an actual example of how it's been done and a few sites that I know of in BC in particular, because we have a lot of mountains, but also sites. I know the guys at I think it was the Ottawa Valley Club or one of the clubs in that area. They had told me they have a repeater to CDC site, and it takes them so much time to get permission just to go up there and tweak a pot if they want to change an audio level or a squelch or something like that. It's a big admin challenge just to get to site. Well, setting up like this, you set up your Raspberry Pi and your AllStar software up at the site, and you can connect it to the internet via a microwave handband. We've done it here in BC on 3.4 gigs. I know the Manitoba folks have done it on 2.4. Scott's my partner in crime on this project, VE7NZ, and he's just set up a 5.9 gig link that we're looking to try out. So all very interesting ways to reliably get the internet back, and now you've got complete control over your repeater. as well as all those alarms and sensors that I mentioned. Of course, the other way is the analog FM voice link, which repeaters like VE3PGC and a few others still have, and that was how we did it back in. That's how we did things like phone patches and repeater-to-repeater links back in the day, and it still works. Now you just put your Pi down here, and now you've got the ability to link the audio from this repeater through into the AllStar network. The only downside with this is you don't have any control because the Pi is not interfaced to the repeater itself. You don't have any control over actual, functions of the repeater. But you can still set up courtesy tones and things like that down here, which is nice. Okay. So what do you need and what does it cost to do all of this? Well, this again is a repeater example. I'll get into the individual examples in a minute. Radio interface is pretty standard, audio in and out, PTT and COS. You might need to make up a custom cable like I've made here for a Motorola Quantar. The radio interface, there's many of them available, and you can build your own around an audio chip like a CM108. But if you want one that's kind of out of the box, all singing, all dancing, it's no more than about $70. You can buy them in kit form for $40. And then a Raspberry Pi. And a Raspberry Pi's supply chain, I'm told that if you can get them, the price is super expensive now, like over $200. But once that all becomes normal again, it'll be back around $120 from Canakit out of Ontario. And with shipping and taxes, I bring them into BC for somewhere between $200 and $250 with all this. And if you look at that compared to a repeater controller like, oh gosh, the RLCs, I think they were, we used back in the 90s. And then, I mean, we were, especially with the interface cards, we were well over like $1,100 for a basic, 2 repeater setup. So yeah, it's a lot better, a much smaller decision for a club to do this. Okay, so now you know about the technology and how it works and what the bits are. Let's talk about the Canada Hub project. Here's a snapshot of one of the racks in my basement that has various hubs and repeater Pis. I could run a lot more on individual Pis, but for redundancy reasons and availability, I try to dedicate Pis to specific tasks. Okay, how did this come about? Well, it's a problem that's been around for a long time, is that there's just very little activity on repeaters. And I'm sure I haven't traveled because of COVID for a couple of years, but I usually travel with my radio. I scan 2 meters and 220 and 440. And I mostly hear the time is often wrong, or the weekly net. And that's great about those nets, by the way, but that's it. And then the repeater sits almost silent for the rest of, for the rest of the time. I guess mostly I'm hearing IDs when I put my radio on scan. And the clubs, probably like yourselves and individuals, put a lot of time and effort and money into doing this, and then the equipment sits there idle. This is not helping anybody. Certainly not encouraging new hams. I know hams who have got their license, bought a radio, loaded all the repeaters in, as you can do in software these days, within a 100-mile radius or something, and put their radio on scan and not heard anything. And then they put their call sign out and nobody comes back to them. And that's terrible because, that's just not good for the hobby. It's not good for our spectrum. And a lot of people go, well, I want to get involved in more active stuff. So I want to join some of these networks like the Canada Hub. But they go to their club executives, and their club executives are very concerned because it's new and it's different. It's going to cost $250 and everybody needs to have lots of meetings about it. And so they just go, you know what? I'm just going to go buy my own node. I'll buy one of those little private nodes and operate out of my house. And that's great in a way because they get active and they're having fun and on the air, but it's not great for the club. It's not great for, again, use of the repeaters and the spectrum and building the community that you get when you hear your friend Doug talking on the repeater. So I think we're, a few years ago, Scott and I were chatting, we're like, this is a real problem. We're really at the risk of losing club members and losing spectrum, and we need to get more activity happening on these bands. And if I go back to 1980s, I was involved in something called the Interprovincial Amateur Radio Network. I was one of the founders, and we connected repeaters across the country on ANIC, the geostationary satellite. And we had a nonprofit organization. We raised money through membership fees, put out a magazine, and we paid for our spectrum. But it was expensive. I mean, the equipment was $25,000 for each earth station. And then we had to link via radio to nodes. And I was thinking to myself, boy, you know, that concept was really good. It was just really hard to fund. And now, instead of $25,000, I can do this for a couple $100 or less a repeater. Hey, it's time to build a Canadian network again. And that was really the origin of the Canada Hub. So we started by connecting the repeaters that Scott and I had set up in the Vancouver area. We'd set up about 11 repeaters. We took a bunch of those, put them together. And then we had other people wanted to join us, and we called that the BC Hub. And then we built this out to ultimately become the Canada Hub. And how would I describe it? I'd say it's a place for Canadian hams to connect and chat, share ideas, carry on nets, discuss hockey, general ham radio banter, you know, how's the weather? But it's a place, it's a place to get together. The reason, one of the reasons I also did it is it didn't exist in this context in Canada. We had the Australian National Network, Freestar in the UK has come along. The WIN system is, and the East Coast Reflector are mostly US systems. How can we do something that doesn't just become swallowed or just an adjunct to one of those networks where the Canadian activity is kind of 10%, right? So we decided to make it, you know, Canadian focused. That doesn't mean we don't mind other people coming to join us, but it's we're trying to build a Canadian focus as a priority. Now we have repeaters connecting either full-time or part-time basis, all the way from St. John's to Vancouver Island, and including Whitehorse and Yellowknife in the north. So I'm very happy. We've only been doing it, I guess, 3 years now. I guess it's 3 years. Yeah, it was right around when COVID started. Yeah. So yeah, 3 years is anniversary. I think it's coming out this month. We do welcome international connections again, but we just want to keep the Canadian focus so that it's that's not lost. And again, it's based on AllStar, but we do have RLP, Echolink. Echolink, we have all these clients that can connect in, and ham check hotline and stuff like that. Now, it's only licensed operators, and that's always very easy to control. I manage it with usernames and password, a username and password. And if that gets leaked or gets in the wrong hands, I can change it in 2 minutes, and I'll just give everybody the new one. But I've never had that problem, and you know, I think the ham community is pretty good at making sure they keep these things with the people that they know are hams. We're not affiliated with any club. We're not looking for money. We actually, it was Scott, myself, and another ham, Dave. We paid for this all ourselves. We wanted to give back to the hobby. We're at that stage, I guess, been doing this since we were all sort of 15 years old. And once you take the club context and the formal association out of it, all the meetings and the incorporation and the treasury and all that stuff, life becomes a lot simpler. So we just thought, you know what, we'll just build it. There's no agenda, no politics, no rules, frankly, other than, you know, normal ham radio good behavior and you know, the I said rules, but there's no rules that we have about what you can do with it. Just come and join us and say hello. Yes, no meetings, no policies, no politics. Okay, just looking at the architecture a tad closer. I mentioned that I kind of divided up a bit. This is for load balancing and fault tolerance. So yes, we have a Canada Hub West node 517301 and East 517300. It really doesn't matter. You can connect into wherever you want out of these two. I don't mind, but I prefer the people in the West connect and the international contact connect into the, sorry, people in the West connect to the West one and people in Ontario East connect to these. It just load balances things a little bit, but it really is no hard and fast rule. And then we have another node set up that handles all the funky stuff, the echo links and all these clients on computers and such. So again, if I have a problem, let's say we had a problem with a password issue or something here, I can drop this node off and the rest of the network stays intact. And the RLP gateway as well is dedicated to Reflector 9029, and it's also a special purpose device. All of this is has backup power at my station here, and then at this location, which is my dad's station. And interestingly enough, today at 2:30, and it's what, 5 o'clock now. Today at 2:30 my time, the power went out for the first time in well over 2 years. And I thought, oh, great, I've got a presentation to give, and we just lost our power. But I got the generator out, and within about 5-6 minutes, I had the entire system up and running off generator power. And we're back up in business. And the power came on just a few minutes before this presentation. But I've left the generator on, so I didn't get to go down and turn it off yet and cross over the wires. But the whole thing is running as we speak off emergency power, and no problem at all. We're also looking at emergency internet backup using HamWAN, which is I can get a shot into the US here from my house up on the hills on 5.9 gigahertz, and that'll give us a fault tolerant internet link. So yeah, long story short is I didn't design this for emergency communications, but it certainly has the potential to be high availability. Okay, this is a few more screenshots from the dashboard that I was showing earlier with all these CPU stats and all this stuff. But it gives you an idea of a typical, this was during one of our nets recently. I just took a screenshot of some of the nodes that were connected. So you can see, kind of where they are on the west, and the do I have the east one here? No, I guess these are the east ones. That's right. See, we've got a VE7 snuck in there, but mostly the eastern nodes here. And then over here, we've got a lot of these are PCs typically they're connected, or MacBooks. And then of course you can see the Echolink clients here. This is the British Columbia hub at the time, which you can see various nodes were connected. Anyway, it's kind of neat. There's another way to look at this, which is, this was in one of our nets recently. Remember I said it's full mesh? This is showing all the nodes. We're here. This Canada hub starts here in blue, and it connects to those other nodes I was showing. But then we're connecting into another network here and another over here. It's so much, you can't see it. It's right. It's too small to print, because there's probably, well, typically on our net on Sundays there's over 200 nodes connected, and because it's full mesh, this person way out here, I don't know, they might be in South Africa or something, they key up, every one of these nodes is going to be hearing them, and vice versa. But does that create chaos? No, for two reasons. One is, if a node is not behaving well, somebody will let you know pretty quickly and help. If it's keying up unnecessarily or got a bad squelch or something, and people like me are always, there's always lots of people saying, oh, I can help you with that and solve that for you. So they go offline until they fix it and then come back. So all the repeaters and nodes are well behaved. The other thing is, we have a team of people from Newfoundland to Vancouver who are monitoring pretty much around the clock, so that if there's a problem, typically a stuck mic or a bad squelch on a repeater, we can shut that off and politely send a note and just say, we disconnected you because of this, and if you need help, let us know. They're not police. They're not telling people what they can do and not do. They're just making sure that things aren't chaos. And it's amazingly well behaved, as I said earlier. So how active is it? There's my own answer. Yes, so we're coming up on 2 years, I guess, as of this May. So we started 2 years ago. We're still building, and it's not that active. I would say about a QSO an hour is what we hear, and we have about one net a day. We try to keep it to no more than that. Otherwise, it'd be just nets all day, people checking whatever. But we try to do a net a day. Sometimes I think 2 on Saturday, and that's kind of nice. We'll talk about those in a minute. But yeah, it's I would say that the activity level is kind of what it used to be like in the early 80s when we were first putting up repeaters, and there was activity. But it's not. It's certainly not overwhelming. You certainly never have to worry about, quote unquote, tying up the network. In fact, when I hear somebody say, okay, well, I've been on here 5 minutes, I better not tie the network, I often jump in and say, please don't worry, we need activity. Invite other people to join in the queue, so keep it going, right? Nets, we talked a little bit about this before the recording. We have our version of the Trans-Canada Net, not to be confused with the wonderful HF Net. It's just a suitable name. So it's Trans-Canada AllStar Net, if you will. And we started this thing that seems to have caught on worldwide called the Question of the Week. I hear it on most nets now. It's great. So question of the week might be when you check in, tell us if you're a contester. Tell us if you work satellites. Do you do CW? What have you built as a kit? What's your project for the summer? Those kinds of things. Were you in field day? And it's really fun to hear people's responses. So that's a very popular net. And it's you can go to our website and get the times for all of these. That's on Sundays. On Mondays, we have a new net starting called the All Hams Net, which starts next week. It's just a social roundtable kind of thing. and the Sounds Good Net, which is hosted by Chris VE3RWJ, and it's all about sound. If you're a musician, you'd love it. If you're any kind of audiophile, you'd love it. If you're just interested in things like we were talking about 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how there's a whole industry of engineering around the sounds of appliances in your house. What kind of sounds your dishwasher should make, and your microwave, and your laundry, your dryer and washing machine, and so you get into some really obscure but interesting topics. The Absolute Tech Net is every Tuesday, and they cover all sorts of ham and non-ham topics. Great net. Triode Net is run by the Prescott Russell Amateur Radio Club, and it's fun. They often have a technical question of the week, where they pull questions out of the exam bank and embarrass us all for not knowing the answers. On Saturdays, we do the Top Talk Net, which is out of the UK. That's where they actually kind of have an interview style, like the old Larry King idea. They bring somebody on, and it might be somebody like, the guy DX Commander or some famous British YouTube person, and he'll come on and they'll interview him over the air and ask him how he got started and bunches, then take questions from the network, and it's a great format. And then the Science Net Saturday evening is an extension of what's hosted on the VE3WOO machine, and that's a great recap of just the week's science news, including amateur space weather, but also just general science stuff. So we have a little bit of activity, something every day for everyone, Okay, how are we over time? Perfect. Okay, I'm just going to whip through a couple more slides, 2 more slides, I think. Okay, ham's concerns. What do we get? If we join this network, our repeater will be busy all the time with QSOs from other places. Truth is, it doesn't happen. It's busy during nets, but you can also schedule this. You can say, I want to. We had a Labrador, a VO2 LB machine in Labrador City, Newfoundland, just joined. And they set up a schedule, and they're connected to us most of the time, but when it's 6 a.m. in Newfoundland and everybody else is sleeping, they connect over to the UK. That's great. They've got it all pre-programmed in AllStar. And if you find that you do connect and it's getting a little too busy for you, you can always disconnect. I mean, that's the thing. It's not like you've signed up for anything. It's completely voluntary. Will I lose control of my repeater if my club connects to this? No, you control everything. You've got all of the codes and all of everything. We don't have any control over your repeater, other than we can disconnect it if it's got a problem. But other than that, you're in complete control. What about emergencies? We had an exercise in it was the PGC machine in Cornwall last Sunday. It was a kayaking thing or something. It wasn't an emergency, but it was an exercise, right? So they just took it off the network, did their thing, then they come back. The fact is, because we've got this geo-redundant design and we've got this emergency power, frankly, if I'm having a problem and I'm out of cellular range, which is not uncommon in British Columbia, and it's 6 in the morning, much better chance somebody in Ontario is going to hear my call for help and be able to help me or call the authorities than somebody in BC. So I think having a connected network and a connected repeater is a matter of improved emergency communications. And we talked briefly about this. Unlicensed users, we've never had this problem, but if we did, we can fix it very fast. And interference and so on, as I mentioned, we've got people that can jump in and fix those very quickly as well. Is this real ham radio? I like to joke. No, this grumpy guy here, he's never happy. The AM operators complained about the single sideband operators, and on and on and on and on it goes. As far as I'm concerned, if you are doing all the things that ham radio is about, you're experimenting, you're talking about technology, and you're just building the community within the fraternity that ham radio is, I don't see why that is a problem. But if Grumpy Face here wants to go and do 80 meter AM, that's fine. I think there's room for everybody. Okay, for the techies, I'll zip through this. If you're thinking, okay, this sounds really neat, I'd love us to take one of our club repeaters and say, well, we'll make this the one for AllStar. And I know, by the way, you guys have 2 on IRLP. You could still do that, and you could add AllStar in, or you could take another one of your repeaters and make it AllStar capable. So here's a few things for if you're that person in the club. Do you need to replace your existing controller? No. it can coexist. In fact, most of my repeaters are running Motorola Quantars, running their own controller, and then I just use the auxiliary controls when we're on AllStar. How much bandwidth is required? It's 87 kilobits per second for the voice, plus some overhead framing, whatever. Let's say 100 kilobits per second is a safe bet. So not a lot. And as I mentioned, sites without internet access can be added with RF links. Which version of Linux does it use? It's Arch Linux. Fairly straightforward. Do you need to be an expert in Linux? No. I would say I wasn't an expert at all, other than configuring some menus and things, and everything is text configurable, so and or script driven through menus, so you can get up to speed pretty quickly on this. There are two versions of the software: AllStar Link, known as ASL, and Ham VoIP. People sometimes ask, well, what's the difference? ASL is open source, so if you're a programmer and you want to get into recompiling this and contributing to the community, go with ASL. Ham VoIP isn't. It's been a little bit packaged up from the original source code to kind of make it a little easier for the ham community to install. It's very stable and very well supported. If I have a problem on a ham VoIP node, the fellow that's written it David can usually issue a fix within 24 hours. Ham VoIP is also scalable. For running hubs, ASL tends to crash around 70 nodes. And as I mentioned, we often get 200 or more on the weekend. So for net, so Ham VoIP can handle that. And if you need help, there's tons of help. There's a support community online that are very friendly and very tolerant and supportive of newcomers. I'm always happy to help with questions. As Doug mentioned, I helped him a bit, and I can, even if necessary, connect into nodes and help people set them up. So, you know, the reason I'm giving this presentation, of course, is just twofold, really. It's education. I love sharing what I've learned and helping people learn about it. I'm hoping, though, that we get more clubs and individuals thinking of joining the network. You know, consider joining it, adding one of your repeaters. Full-time would be great, but even if not, part-time, that'd be great. We can help you in every which way. You can always try it and change your mind later, disconnect. The final thing I'd say is, if you're interested in trying it out as an individual, send me an email, VE7NZ@rac.ca, and I'll send you the instructions, screenshots, so step-by-step instructions for all the different devices and laptops and so on, and the username and password. And you can set that up, and by tonight or tomorrow, you'd be on the air and be monitoring it and able to participate and give you a good sense of it. But again, as I said earlier in those slides, I have nothing against people doing that, but I do hope that we connect more repeaters in the country to get that spectrum being used. And that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Adrian. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Tony V3DWI. When a local repeater, wherever it might be, when they want to do some controlling and use control tones via DTMF, is that heard throughout the entire system?
No, only the very first little blip, the very first tone as it detects it.
Okay.
If anything, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anybody else? I like what Tony did. If you have a question, identify yourself and then go ahead.
Hi, Adrian. It's Doug, VE3XDB. Thank you so much for doing this. This is very interesting. And thanks again for your help. So just to let everybody know what I'm running here, I'm running nothing. I have a little AllStar. I actually have two Raspberry Pis. One is a DV switch server, and the other is an AllStar server. And I don't even have any radio attached to it. I use an Android device to actually connect to it. So I even cheat on that, but it works great. And I was going to say we could try a live test, but the all TechNet is on right now, I think. I'm listening and the TechNet is on. But so in terms of So what I was going to ask you about, Adrian, was just so where does this go from here? What do you you know, you mentioned you'd like to get more repeaters involved. I know that you said you got Saskatchewan involved lately, and
Yeah,
some
we've got
other
a lot of
some other
activities.
folks.
Yeah, yeah, we're getting, as I give these presentations, we're getting more and more regions / towns coming online. I mean, my you know, I'll be very happy once I see every province and territory on a regular basis. I've got even conversations going with the guys at VE7NZ at Alert Bay, but they've got some bandwidth challenges because they have to pay for satellite time. But yeah, I'd love to see every region, you know, represented on the network. Ultimately, I think that's just as a proud Canadian, I'd love to see that kind of camaraderie and hockey rivalries.
The only other point I wanted to mention or ask you about, Adrian, is the if someone wants to just listen in without having, you know, without doing anything, and they have access to Echolink, they can listen into the Canada Hub on Echolink as well. Isn't that right?
Yes, yes, you can listen in, you can talk as well. The Echolink client is popular because it's really easy to use. On the iPhone, dead easy, and on the laptop, it's dead easy. Most of the clients are free. I think the one that I paid the most for, or the only one I paid for, was for my laptop, but my MacBook laptop, which was $20 US one time, and it's a fantastic client. But everything else is free, so it's easy to get set up. If you've got a computer and a speaker, if you're doing what we're doing today, you've got what you need. I should also say, do go to the website. You can click on the dashboard. There's a link that says see what's happening right now on the network, and it'll give you the full dashboard. But I've also included most of the repeaters that I look after as well, just for fun, that are all part of the network. But that site, it gives you the details on the nets. It gives you links to all of the different equipment companies that make the various micronodes and things that you can consider. So hopefully that's helpful as well.
That is helpful, Adrian. We have a number of our students. We have a basic course running right now. And so there are a number who are here tonight that haven't quite finished. They haven't written the exam yet, and they're working on it. And this will be a great way for them to sort of listen in. If they have a computer, they can listen into amateur radio activity. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I guess they are supposed to have a call sign, because when you connect in, you provide your call sign so we can see who's connected to make sure it's licensed hams. That's the only thing I would say. But you know, one of the projects I haven't had time for is to set up a Broadcastify link, which streams it out so you can just listen from a web player. So it's not quite as a listen only mode yet. But hey, you guys are close. Get that license, and then there's all this and more.
Well, they're about a month away from their scheduled exam, so hopefully that everything will go well. So, are there any other questions for Adrian?
Yeah, hi Adrian, it's Nick VA3NNW. I'm one of those techies you're talking about who runs a node. I look after our club VE3RBM node. It runs Echo IRLP, so it has Echolink and IRLP on it. You mentioned, I think, unless I misheard, nodes that run all three, Echolink and IRLP and AllStar.
Yes, you can do that, but it's a little, when you bring IRLP in, it's a slightly bit trickier. You just have to treat your IRLP box like another radio. So that's what I have coming into the Canada Hub, is I have a PC running the IRLP interface, and I connected that to the Raspberry Pi, and the Raspberry Pi thinks it's keying a radio, and it thinks it's listening to a COS from the radio, but it's actually the IRLP interface.
Oh, interesting. I may have to get onto you afterwards and find out how that's done. Okay.
Yeah, I can help you with that, but it's one extra nuance. Yeah, it's not not quite out of the box, but it's.
I was led to believe it wasn't possible to be on all three because I mean, you mentioned earlier when you've got one IRLP call up, it locks out all the others, which the IRLP folks see as a feature, not as a bug.
Right.
So I was led to believe like the problem is you need to get the lockout correct. And Echo IRLP, for example, is doing the same thing. If you've got an Echo link call up, it won't let you bring up an IRLP call, and or vice versa. You have to sort of have one at a time. So I assume the issue is along those lines, that it doesn't want you having AllStar and IRLP at the same time, or Echo Link at the same time, I imagine. Anyway, I'll chat offline, I think.
Yeah, I can drop me an email. I can help you with those questions. There is a way to do most of what you want to do.
Cool. All right, chat later. Thanks.
Are there any other additional questions for Adrian?
Yes, I've got one. It's Jeff, VE3 Juliet Zulu Tango. I have the Echolink app, and if I'm in Ontario, are you saying it's okay to connect to node 590387, Adrian? That's VE7NZ-L.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's
from anywhere in the world you can connect to it.
Okay, I just did connect in, and I did hear the net, and it says there's one person of 10 connected or something. So it didn't really look like it was active, but I'll explore that. I really appreciate this this presentation and information. I've been licensed since July, and there's a lot to learn. So thanks for the opening and information. I'll explore this a bit.
The 1 of 10 is a funny thing because I think I actually have allowed it to do up to 30 or 40 or something Echolink connections at once. We've never had that many, but
right.
You should be able to go beyond 10. The other thing is when you connect in, go to the website that's on the screen right now, canonhub.ca, and then go to the see what's happening right now on the network
right
page, and then you'll be able to see the dashboard.
Oh yeah, I'm on it now. Great. Okay, thanks.
So you'll see your call sign down there under Echolink on one of the nodes.
Right. Okay. So is it Linux based when you put the software on the Pi?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm learning that too. So okay, enough questions. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
It's easy. You just flash an SD card, boot it up, and it steps you through enter your call sign, enter your node number. It's menu driven, and you get the basics set up fairly quickly. Then you get stuck and you call me and I help you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions?
And there are several Linux geeks in the club as well. So there's lots of help if you need it.
In 35 minutes, if you guys are looking, you're going to see the whole dashboard go red for a few minutes because I'm going to have to disconnect the generator and restart on BC hydropower again. So once I'm finished, once the net's finished, it's ongoing right now. My neighbor's already called and said the power's back on. Why is your generator still running? I didn't want to disrupt the net that was in progress.
Well, Adrian, on behalf of the club, I want to thank you for calling in. I don't know if everyone realizes you're out in BC right now, and that one of the advantages of running our meetings virtually like this. And so we're really pleased that you're able to join us. I think you've prompted a lot of thinking, a lot of perhaps a few more new projects have been seeded to this evening. And I know we'll talk as well among our club executive about AllStar as well, because you put it out there. So it's the only us is to consider and respond. So I think we will do that.
That's great. I really appreciated
as well.
You inviting me. If you know any other clubs, a lot of people belong to more than one club, or you belong to another club, and they would be interested in this, by all means, I'm happy to schedule something. I also will do a plug for another presentation I'm doing while I'm here on Tuesday, May 17th, in case it interests anybody. Now it's going to be a bit late because it's 10 p.m. Eastern. It's at 7 p.m. BC time, but it's on high frequency terrain analysis. So if you're an HF operator and you've wondered how the land around your property affects your propagation and your chances in a contest and so on. I'll be describing how you can use the software from ARRL to assess that. It might interest you to know that the land for up to 3 kilometers around your station has a very profound effect on your performance. So that's and if it is too late for you back east, I can always point you to a recording for that after we've done it as well.
Well, that would be awesome. I'd be happy to send it to Doug, who you know, whatever. And Doug is on our executive, and by all means promote that. I have no. We're always looking to learn from each other. That's part of what we love about this hobby.
Sounds good.
You're welcome to stay with us if you want, Adrian. We'll move into our regular club business for the last little bit.
Thank you. I'm going to drop because I actually have a call, a business call now. It's 5:30, and that's I think 8:30 in Asia, and I have to do a call for work. So
there we go. That's 2 minutes away, I think.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian. Much appreciated.
7-3, my friend.
All right.